As well as retrieving and updating database records, you can use LINQ to add new records using a similar technique. In this lesson, you'll use LINQ to make the new invoice page functional. To begin, open the Spark sample file from your Sample Files folder. And view the New Transaction.aspx page in Design View. This web page is not yet functional. Eventually, you'll be able to choose a customer from the drop-down list and add a new customer invoice. You'll notice that the names of the controls on the page closely match the names of the properties in the database. This is best practice. If a control is used to display or set a value in a database, its name should match the name of the database field it displays or sets. Now open the code behind file of new transaction.aspx. We now need to create a new instance of your data context class. To do this, add a new using statement inside the else statement to create a new instance of the Spark data context class. Using Spark data context, data equals new Spark data context. In previous lessons, you've retrieved an invoice object from the database by using the Spark data context class. In this lesson, you want to add a new invoice, so you need to create a new instance of the invoice class. Add the following code inside the using statement. Invoice new invoice equals new invoice. As you should recall from lesson 6.10, this code creates a new instance of the invoice class called new invoice. Now we'll set the properties of the new invoice. Add the following code on the next line. New invoice dot customer ID equals 5. The customer drop-down isn't functional yet, so you're setting the customer ID manually for now to test the page. In lesson 11.2, you'll make the customer drop-down automatically retrieve every customer in the database. Now add the following code to set the other properties according to the controls on the page. New invoice dot invoice number equals text box invoice number dot text. New invoice dot invoice amount equals convert dot to decimal text box amount dot text. New invoice dot invoice tax amount equals convert dot to decimal text box tax amount dot text. Lastly, we need to add some code to set the date and time of the invoice. New invoice dot invoice date equals datetime dot now. While setting the properties of the invoice object, you might have noticed that there's an invoice ID property that you didn't set. Invoice ID is the table's unique primary key which is automatically maintained by the database. In most well-designed databases, the primary key is automatically maintained, so you don't need to set it. Next, we'll need to tell LINQ to send the data to the database. Just creating an invoice object and calling the Submit Changes method isn't enough. You need to specifically tell LINQ to insert the record. You can do this with the following code: data.invoices.insertOnSubmit new invoice. Note that as well as inserting a single invoice object using the InsertOnSubmit method, you can insert a collection of invoice objects, such as a list invoice, by using the InsertAllOnSubmit method. To insert the record, we'll now need to call Submit Changes. Data.submitChanges. Finally, we'll add some code to tell the user that the invoice was added successfully. Panel addInvoice.visible equals false. Panel confirm added.visible equals true. This will hide the panel containing the new invoice form and show a panel with the confirmation text. Test the page now by viewing it in your browser. Complete the form and click Submit. Your new invoice has been inserted and the confirmation text appears on the page. You've now completed Lesson 10.8. Insert database records using LINQ.